Well, hello. It's Fred Weems here, and tonight is March 11th of 2020, and I thought I would give an off-the-talk, see I messed that up, an off-the-cuff talk on a book I've just read. I just want to see if I can do this. Usually my presentations are readings of things I've written, or songs I'd like to sing. I posted my little Goodreads review on Facebook of the book, but what more would I like to say about it? Something Happened came out in 1974. Joseph Heller was the author, and of course, he was extremely famous in reading circles of I'm not being articulate. He was known for his novel Catch-22. In my day, I went to high school graduated in 78. So in my day, Catch-22 was typically assigned reading in high schools, particularly my high school. We read lots of hip books. I didn't read Catch-22 until about 3 months ago, but I was well aware of it. People read me parts of it because they thought it was great. They'd say, hey, listen to this. My big hero at the time was Kurt Vonnegut. My brother Bob got me reading him after he read the collection Welcome to the Monkey House and Cat's Cradle. So I borrowed Bob's copy of Cat's Cradle when I was about 12, in 7th grade, and really loved the style. In any case, in 1974, the New York Times ran a front page of the book review. Every Sunday the Times ran something called the New York Times Book Review. They still do. I haven't seen it in years because I just don't manage to wake up in time to read the paper. It may be a bad reflection on me. Vonnegut had a front page of the Times Book Review of his friend Joseph Heller's book, Something Happened. That review stuck with me for decades. I read it when I was 14, the review, and thought that the parts Vonnegut quoted sounded brilliant. One of the quotes was a passage which I just ran across in reading Something Happened, to the effect that, he spent much of his life curled up in the fetal position when he slept, but now in middle age he was stretched out with his hands on his chest as if he were ready for his coffin. That really stuck with me. Vonnegut wrote a very persuasive review, and I think it set the tone for other critics who would have liked it anyway, but a man of Vonnegut's position gave them something of encouragement to express how much they liked it. The book itself was a great departure from Catch-22. Catch-22 came out in 1961. Heller didn't produce another novel until Something Happened in 1974. A glance at the copyright page, though, shows copyright 1966, 1974 by Joseph Heller, which means he'd been writing it a long time, and I imagine an excerpt or two appeared over the years before the book came out, but I don't know. My main suspect is the Paris Review. I can't believe they would not, somebody didn't have chapters of it already in a magazine. In any case, in 1967, I believe, Heller presented a play at Yale, which I think was his alma mater, called We Bombed in New Haven. And I read that between Catch-22 and Something Happened. It's filled with the sort of humor that's in Catch-22, but by no means as compelling. Heller was a novelist, a great novelist. This sort of one-off play, which I don't think was presented many places, was interesting and amusing, and it had its political point, a very overt political point about war being bad. This is not to put Heller down, but it was not what he was really focusing on at the time. What he focused on was this grim study, worthy of Eugene O'Neill, of a man second-guessing himself at every turn, examining his past, projecting about his future, and not knowing what the hell he's supposed to do, what he has done, what he's going to do. And it is grim. There are moments of sardonic humor, but he really keeps those few and far between. He was a master humorist. He's one of the few novelists who can incorporate absolute sort of vaudeville-style comedy into his work. Other writers of his era can be very funny at times. I laugh at Updike's ability with embarrassment. No one rivals Updike, I suppose, in, showing how somebody can be excruciatingly embarrassed. But Heller really could have been, I think, a stand-up comic in Vegas. He could have written for Laugh-In or Johnny Carson. I'm not being facetious. He had that. And he uses it to great effect in Catch-22. And I think a lot of people read that and don't notice how heavy the serious parts are. Even though the comedy itself has serious overtones, it creates a slant that became a staple in the 60s of almost all comedy. When something happened, though, he comes totally into his own as an artist. He uses many of the same effects that are used in Catch-22. One of his effects is a scene will be described and suddenly an image will come out of nowhere having apparently nothing to do with that. And he doesn't explain it. He does it in Good as Gold, too, 3/4 of the way through the book. Suddenly this third-person narration has a paragraph in which the author himself talks about what he was planning to do with his book and how he's changed his mind about certain things. And then it just goes on to third-person narrative, and it never returns to the breaking of the fourth wall. But in Something Happened, he uses all these techniques with what I was tempted at first when I was reading it to call a poker face. But this is beyond a poker-faced comedy. This is not even ironic humor. This is a description of hell. And it is very somber. And there are literally maybe 5 fairly comic paragraphs. But he does not run with it at all. He won't do it. It is proof to me that this is not merely a humorist who can effectively do serious work. This was a very, very deeply serious writer who I think caused his readership to think humor was going to be his means of expression. And Something Happened, he proves that humor doesn't suit this particular character. And so for 566 pages, you have a man who is telling you his woes, and it is bleak. One of the things about mid-20th century American literature is a penchant for dystopian suburban description. But Heller, who uses that, it goes way beyond it. This is about the human condition. It is absolutely poetic. The book is filled with alliteration. It is paced with tremendous deliberation. If Molly Bloom's soliloquy is a masterpiece of a description of somebody's mind. This whole book is a male version of that. Um, it puts Heller actually on a par with the three or four greatest writers in American history. He's right up there with Eugene O'Neill, Herman Melville, and, you know, certainly anybody writing at the time he wrote would have touched on many of the themes in this book, but he goes all the way with it. There is a novel that tries this same sort of thing in the postmodern era, which is extremely grim and masterful, called The Pale King, David Foster Wallace's final novel. But what Heller does is he captures, of course, his own generation, and it is a generation of tremendous achievement and great darkness and tragedy. You know, my father, of that generation, 2 years younger than Heller, always poo-pooed Tom Brokaws' idea that was the greatest generation. But for what it's worth, I think that name kind of works. They shaped this country. As great as David Foster Wallace's Pale King is, it's somehow not universal the way this book is, which is no slight on Wallace, and it's no slight on Philip Roth or Saul Bellow or Updike or Arthur Miller. They all kind of would describe that sort of midlife crisis very well. But Heller is your go-to author for what happened in the American century. Anyway, that's it for me for now. Talk to you later.